Hello, creative, and welcome back to the Empowered Creatives podcast, finding confidence between hustle and burnout. I'm Victoria Hines, creative career coach, helping creatives just like you level up or pivot in their careers. I'm really excited to talk to this guest today. We've talked on Instagram, but we've never talked face-to-face before, so I'm super excited to have Zach Smith on the show today. He worked in the Chinese film industry for over 9 years as a screenwriter, a kung fu stuntman, and a vice president of a film and co-production company. His photography has been featured in National Geographic Traveler, which is pretty awesome. And currently he's writing several creative lifestyle guides, which can be found on Creative Enzo, and filming a documentary series exploring creative lifestyles. A lot of synergy here going on, but welcome to the show, Zach.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, I always kick it off with a big, tough question.
hmm
What do artists and creatives need to know is possible today?
Well, we all know the cliche that like everyone's creative. What inspires me most and what I'm focused on is that everything can be creative. And so even if you're not like, a painter, a sculptor, a singer, any other creative field, if you just want to approach any daily habit or experience with creative elements, you can express yourself and support your creativity in every action of every day.
I love that. And you might be the first person I've ever heard mention that, not just thinking about everyone is creative, but how anything you could do can be a creative outlet and creative art. I just look at my own life and I can feel that synergy of like, there's things that are inexplicable, like making dinner, that can sometimes feel like just like a creative outlet at times.
Yeah, I love creative cooking. I feel like cooking, because there's so many different colors, and I don't know if you heard the term like eat the rainbow,
Hmm.
but it's a very popular health advice term, and I use that in my own cooking. Just to, feel like I'm painting while I'm, cooking. I mean, it was like sometimes I don't even think of ingredients. I think of what color is missing from this dish.
Ooh, that's a really cool way to think about it. I often go for like, is it missing like something vinegary or like salt, acid, heat, sweet, that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
I've never thought about the color. I love that. I love
Yeah.
that approach.
I try to approach everything with how can I add creativity to this? So a lot like cooking.
Absolutely. So I want to hop back to, the first time you sent me your bio was the first time I think I knew that you had been working in the Chinese film industry. So that's what I want to kick it off with. What was that like working over there?
Well, I originally went to China as a study abroad and to learn Chinese, and I was studying international relations. But my ultimate goal is because I've always wanted to be Jackie Chan in a way. I studied martial arts and taught kung fu for most of my life in some way or another. And after I graduated from college, I moved back to China and got into the marketing industry as well as even teaching English, taught Kung Fu a little bit over there as well. And I had an agent finding me positions to, continue my stunt work out there so I could get into
Mhm.
Kung Fu movies. But then when I finally made it into one, a Jackie Chan movie, in fact, I realized that what I actually loved doing was all the creative stuff in the background because I had grown up making a
Um,
lot of kung fu movies with my friends where I wrote the script, I did the filming, I did the fight choreography, and like I loved all that so much that like when I finally like made it to like a really cool movie opportunity, I was like, oh, you know what? I actually want to be the person that's designing like what the movie is. And so like I kind of took a break from all that, wrote a script in about 30 days, and then got very lucky with the community out there and like sold it
Wow.
immediately and started networking into the film industry out there and then just kept making more and more connections.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. What a like big yes from the universe that you're kind of like headed in the right direction.
Well, it took a left turn eventually, but yeah, it was very affirming. I it was great to be in just this like constant creative output of just like
Mm.
meeting all these different, that's what I loved the most about living abroad was, there's people from everywhere in these communities where there's so much to learn and inspire you. I mean, that's what I love the most about living in China was every day was different. Never knew who I was going to meet. I never knew what I was going to experience. It was always inspiring. So like, I mean, I was able to do a lot, but I was in such like a great place to like be supported by it.
Absolutely. What was the most challenging part of being a creative abroad in a different country?
Well, there's even when you're just like normally traveling, there's always going to be hiccups, and
Hmm.
cultural exchange can have its own challenges and difficulties. I grew up in a family that constantly traveled, and had issues from as long as I can remember. So I always had this kind of mindset of just kind of going with the flow. So that helped me a lot, with approaching challenges and seeing the humor out of it, and seeing how you can turn you know these challenges into creative opportunities, especially like with what I like to do was being a storyteller. All these good experiences, challenging experiences, really inspired my writing in a lot of ways. So there was always like another perspective to view the challenges from.
Absolutely. I like that you were able to find sort of the positive twist on everything too, of how can I take something that's challenging or maybe didn't quite meet expectations and find a way to turn it into an opportunity, which I can admit I'm not always good at that. I strive to be, but it's
Yeah,
it's challenging to say the
yeah. Well,
least.
that's the goal, is but yeah, even just
So,
looking back
yeah.
on it can be a experience and seeing a new perspective.
Absolutely. So you mentioned there was a big left turn. Do you want
Yeah.
to talk more about that left turn a little bit?
It's kind of what I've dubbed my own creative crisis in a way. A challenge. It was the biggest challenge, truly, that I ever faced. I had made it as very far in the Chinese film industry. I was a vice president of a production of a film development company and a co-production company. I had about 3 movies about to go into production. I had my first TV show that I had sold the pilot, and we were beginning to start the filming process. And everything was like golden in life. I had, an incredible partner. I had, amazing friends. It was cloud nine. And then there was some changes in the film industry that kind of caused a lot of issues, and my all my projects just evaporated pretty much overnight,
Hmm.
because of some changes in the Chinese film industry, and many companies fell apart. It was a crisis in the community basically, and during
Right.
that time, it was like just one thing after another, like kind of started stacking up, falling down. I mean, and I as I was trying to pick myself up again, try to get more creative, I was having a lot of trouble just writing. And more issues started popping up that I just couldn't even do anything creative. And like,
Hmm.
it was this like kind of deep depression. And then like I realized it was time to move back to the US. And then like I came back to the US, and like there was this, my father was sick, and so it was like constantly like another thing. And like I got to this point where I was really questioning like my creativity for the first time and my creative process, because I
Hmm.
had never really like considered like the science of it, or what, how I defined my own process. Like I had
Hmm.
also become so attached to the outcome of my creativity, because I
Right.
because I had finally like hit these like amazing milestones. So like, and
Yeah.
then they were just, they vanished. So like, because of that like loss and that attachment to it, I started really diving into the science of creativity, starting with my favorite creative psychologist, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. um highly recommend him. He that his
Mm.
I'm currently rereading his book on creativity um for the fourth time now, but with a I like to sometimes read books from a new perspective. So this time, now that I've been studying a lot more Zen, which I'll get into very quickly,
Yeah.
I'm looking at this book from a a Zen perspective. But well, at the same time, I was learning all this science about creativity to understand why I couldn't write anymore, why I couldn't do
Mm.
photography anymore, and started seeing these connections between creativity and well-being. I was also reading a lot of philosophy from Stoicism, Taoism, and Zen Buddhism, and started seeing all these really interesting connections of like discovering your true nature and then embodying that in every action. And like I started developing what I call creative my the Zen art of creative living, where I didn't focus on the results anymore. I just wanted to be in the act of creativity. And so like
Mm.
slowly, like bit by bit, I was supporting my creativity through wellness and adding creativity into like every single element of my day, even in the smallest like steps, just to like, be in that process. And like eventually I had, it continued to grow until I created a Creative Enzo and wanted to share my own kind of process of discovery and growth and rediscovery of my creativity.
Absolutely. Oh, you're reminding me. Trusting the process has been something I have always struggled with
Mm,
personally, to the point where I created something to go on my wall. So every morning I would wake up and see those
yeah.
words, because it's hard. It's
Yeah.
incredibly difficult to, we live in a society where we are awarded and accoladed for our outcomes and the things we produce and the things we do, but to fall in love with the process is challenging. I'm curious, did you ultimately discover that that was where the block was coming from? Was you're tying it to outcomes?
That was definitely like one of the blocks. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of different blocks that you face in your creative life, and my relationship with creative blocks has really changed over time, because at first it could stop a whole weeks of progress. And I come from like my kung fu background. I can be very dedicated and hardworking, and that can be great for getting into the flow, but it can be just as hard as getting out of the flow sometimes.
Yeah.
And like one of my creative blocks, I've kind of befriended the term, because now it's kind of like a way of like, hey, it's time to slow down, it's time to rest, it's time to relax, and like
Mm.
reflect on like what's been done in that day. Like I like Ernest Hemingway has been a big inspiration for me, with his creative lifestyle of doing work in the morning and then adventures in the afternoon. And I've I'm a very early morning creative. I wake up around 4 a.m. and get a bunch of
Oh my gosh.
writing. Yeah, it comes from a background of kung fu and being a lifeguard. So I got into that rhythm, and I enjoy starting my day before like everybody else wakes up, and
Yeah.
like that quiet, that solitude. I love getting like as much done as possible before the day begins. And like I really got into that mode of like getting a ton of work done in the morning, and now trying to refocus my afternoons on creative adventures of exploring the creative elements in my day-to-day life and supporting my well-being through like running is one of my favorite habits I mix with creativity. I do a lot of brainstorming runs as I train for some upcoming marathons, and like the work I get done out of a run is amazing. It's a big part of my creative process.
Absolutely. So I know you mentioned the Zen principles, and it's something you've really taken on both into your business and your creative life and what you do. Can you share a little bit about what those are? What are the Zen principles?
Well, Zen is interesting because it's both simple and complicated. It's at its basic elements, Zen is a mindfulness practice, a meditation. But over the years, Zen monks started adding a lot more creativity, especially when Zen reached Japan, where it got the name Zen. In China, it's known as Chan.
Okay.
But when it reached Japan, they started approaching the idea of what they call enlightenment, which has been romanticized a bit by the West. And
Hmm.
Zen enlightenment is a understanding of your true nature, your basic elements of who you are, and then embodying that in every action to find this inner peace. So instead of trying to force things that don't vibe with you, you're more at peace with where you are in this present moment. And it really connected with me trying to understand, who I was as a creative, who I wanted to be as a creative, and developing that mindfulness to create a mindset of adding creativity to every part of life and enjoying that process alone and without the outcome of it. And Zen can be described in basically three steps, I would say, which is mastering the mind, which is starting like a mindfulness practice, whether it be meditation, learning how to be present with your breath, or however meditation appears to you. It's about developing that mindfulness and using that tool to reflect and connect with yourself, to understand your true nature, your true creative nature, your why, the reasons why you want to make your life novel and worthwhile. And then once you find those realizations and continue to develop them, you learn how to embody that in a mindfulness method of every action being an expression of who you are, what your creativity is in that moment, and not only supporting the creative process by adding creativity to all these different elements and training those creative skills by habit stacking, but inspiring a life that you love and enjoy, so that it's a very balanced approach instead of the reverse side of being a workaholic, which is kind of where I came from.
I think we all came from that. I mean, if you were born in America, I think it's a little bit ingrained into you.
Yeah.
Finding that right balance in your career is incredibly difficult as a creative. If you are lacking time, energy, or money to do the thing that you love, it might be time to figure out what needs to change. If you have no idea where to start, I encourage you to grab my free creative career audit. This worksheet will walk you through a process to help you identify what's bringing you joy in your work and what really needs to go. You can head to my website at www.victoriahines.com or grab the direct link in the show notes below. Alrighty, back to the show. How have the Zen principles really inspired creative Enzo and what you're creating today?
So Enzo is a Zen practice, a mindfulness practice of drawing a circle or an incomplete circle where
Hmm.
you free the mind to let the body create. That is what an Enzo means. It's a moment where you're connected both body and mind, and you're just in the flow of creativity. And that was one of the connections I made when I was studying the science of creativity, as well as reading different, philosophy things. And it hit me. I was like, oh, okay, I want to live a life that is perfectly balanced of creativity and well-being, where it's and there's so many different elements that are intertwined with creativity and well-being, from like autonomy, uh curiosity and awe, and mastering the flow to utilize your creativity in a way that supports your life and its enjoyment. And that's what I was most inspired by, Zen, and making those connections with creativity to create Creative Enzo. And try to explore these different lifestyles throughout history. That's my favorite thing to do, is ask the question, what is creative living? Because it's so different for everyone, and that's a beautiful thing to explore these different perspectives to inspire your own journey of creative living.
I know you mentioned at the very beginning of creativity can be found in anything. Are there certain aspects that you were surprised once you put two and two together where you started finding creativity in your everyday life?
Oh yeah, I constantly find different acts of creativity in my everyday life. I would say running again is one of the habits I practice the most, with how that comes off as an expression. But there's really endless ways to add creativity, like cleaning. I think can even be a creative
Mm.
act of, like, because I don't know. I grew up, with a lot of chores, and I didn't like them, of course.
Sure.
And but I was a latchkey kid, so I had to do a lot of chores to you know uh, earn allowance and all that fun stuff. And I remember even as a child, like trying to somehow turn vacuuming the carpet into a fun exercise. And these days, it's like, oh, you could, draw designs with the vacuum in a way, or like turn it into a brainstorming method. Because in the creative process, like I believe it's the second step, is incubation phase. And it's probably the most, I consider it the most important phase, because it's where you step away from a problem, and
Hmm.
you either focus on something else, or go about solving another problem. But it's that time of like stillness and separation that you have to experience before you get that aha eureka moment. And so that's what I think that drives me to explore different ways of adding creativity to every action, because that ignites this incubation phase, so that new connections can be formed in your mind, and you can live a life that's constantly inspiring eureka moments.
It sounds like it's not just adding creativity, but it's making space for the creative process and
Absolutely.
realizing that it can come up in unexpected times.
Yeah.
I know, I think that's why I've always semi enjoyed doing dishes. And I was living in a house, I don't think I had a dishwasher for the last 8 years.
Mm,
I've been doing like dishes by hand the last 8 years.
yeah.
Welcome to Chicago. Um, but it's always been a meditative process for me, and it's always like my step away from work or my
Absolutely.
place to like find a moment where I don't have to be staring at a screen or producing or making. I just get to be. So I love that's so I mean, I'm not surprised by it, but also like I think if I told previous roommates of mine who hated cleaning, like, hey, just think of it as like a creative process, they'd look at me like, what?
Yeah. I've always been pretty organized, but I would say living in China definitely helped me be a cleaner person, just because we didn't have dishwashers or dryers even. So
Yeah.
you had to plan all your activities very, very responsibly and mindfully. And so, I was always, problem solving in these different ways, as well as, like, we talked about the challenges of living abroad and traveling, and like the embracing those as opportunities.
100%. So, kind of going back to this big story, like you went through this huge upheaval in your creative life of being on top of the world, having your career upended. I feel like in many ways, the pandemic was that for a lot of people as well. I mean, all of us had our lives upended. What do you think has really lent itself to building your resiliency?
Hmm. Well, the thing that I've been embracing the most this year is just the act of letting go.
Hmm.
And I think there's, when you're trying to like fuel that fire of hope when you're in the middle of despair, it can be you feel like you have to like force things to get them moving. You have to force yourself to get up. You have to force yourself to, do eat healthy. You have to force yourself. It feels that way. And I definitely, faced that where I was, I knew I had to make healthier, habits to get back into the right mind of to be in my creative process. But the more you force things, the more it like pushes back. And I would say the biggest lesson I've learned is, and continuing to practice, is how much more energy I get, and creative energy, especially from just letting go and kind of going more with the process and finding um, stillness instead of constantly trying to just fuel that energy to keep going and going and going. Like meditation has been a big tool for me. I mean, I've been meditating since I was a very young child, but it has, hasn't always been my strongest habit. But as I've, trying to embrace habits to learn about letting go more, I've noticed like I have more energy, I have more ideas, I have more inspiration. Like that has like been the biggest thing that I'm still exploring to today. Like winter is a big reflection time for me, and every season has its own, challenges and rewards to explore creative living in a new way. For me, this winter, I've been focusing a lot on this last year and reflecting on like how much more power and energy I've gotten from letting go and
Hmm.
finding habits that teach you to let go.
Hmm. I love that. And so instead of fighting it, instead of pushing it, I mean, I think it goes back to trusting the process. Like you
Absolutely,
can
it
still
always
have the
does.
same. Yeah, it does. It's like you can still have the goals, you can still have the things you want to accomplish or do, or the habits you want to form, but sometimes you just have to let it go in the moment and trust that it's going to be there tomorrow and trust that maybe tomorrow's going to be a better day.
Yeah. I think that it's a big part of like why I started studying so much on different creative lifestyles, because when I was trying to figure out how to, you know, get back to doing my creative work, I was like looking at all these, famous creative minds throughout history. It was like, they faced these issues, they faced different depression and anxieties. How did they overcome it? And I constantly started thinking, when you look up a lot about these different creative lifestyles, you see quotes about the work. And I could have kept questioning, like, what about the in-between time? How
Mhm.
what do you do with that time? And like it's still hard to find, especially like where my research has gone these days. But it like when you find these like tidbits like just interesting moments in a creative life, you're like, wow, we are all the same. Like and it's just like there's so much to be learned from that space in between working and finding a lifestyle that works for you, that supports you and your creative process, as well as like finding a deeper understanding of who you are and who you want to be, so you can express your creativity in more effective and healthy ways.
Yeah, I love that. So much to learn from the space in between. Beautiful thing. All right, here's my last question for you. What advice would you give to an artist who is looking to feel more confident in their career today?
What advice would I give an artist looking to be more confident today? Hmm, that's a good question. I believe it is much easier to be creative when you're maximizing your optimal experiences in everyday life. And those aren't my own words. That comes from Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, but it stuck with me and what inspired my own journey. Because when you start learning to create for yourself and create things that add joy and make your life novel and worthwhile, you start inspiring like not only your own life but the lives around you and the creative future ahead of you. So I think focusing on the space between, gives you more confidence to move forward instead of focusing on different times. Be here now.
I love that. Zach, how can we stay in touch with you?
You can find me on all the social media sites at Creative Enzo, ENSO, as well as creativeenzo.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Zach.
Thank you. This was awesome.
All right, creative, here is your one thing this week. I want you to find the space in between by taking a pause. This could be by slowing down, taking a walk, stepping away from your work, or even moving into a mindful activity, such as vacuuming the floor. Find a time to pause. And afterward, I want you to ask yourself, what happens to your creative work when you let yourself ground into the in-between moments? If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. And until the next time, stay creative.